Well, Dagan, it's surreal just to come to the Capitol complex this morning. When you start talking about green zones and checkpoints, it reminds me when I served in Afghanistan, not serving in Congress and in Washington, D.C., but you have 25,000 troops here on the Capitol grounds. To put that into perspective, that's 10 times more than all of the troops combined that we have in Afghanistan today. I hope this doesn't last for long, but the mayor of Washington, D.C. says get used to this as the new normal. That would be a shame. We need to open up the Capitol building and these monuments in this great city to the American people as soon as we can safely and responsibly do so. So I really hope it doesn't last for long.
Is it possible it does, though? Are you concerned about government overreach, if you will?
Well, I don't know about government overreach. I mean, it appears there are serious threats in the threat stream that are being addressed. Is this an overreach? That's something that I hope we can dig into in the days to come. Let me say this, too. I will be out on the Capitol grounds on Wednesday to observe the peaceful transfer of power. It's a terrible image. What makes America great, by the way, is that peaceful transfer of power every 4 years. But it's not a good image when it takes 25,000 troops to enforce that peaceful transfer of power, and that's why this is an image that's probably going to stick with us for a long time. I hope it's not an overreach, but I hope we study the specifics of it in the days and months to come. I remember what I felt like, by the way, Dagan, 4 years ago when a number of Democrats refused to go out and participate when Donald Trump was sworn into office because they didn't recognize his legitimacy. I will be out there seated as a Republican. I know most of my Republican colleagues will be seated out on the Capitol lawn as well to observe Joe Biden's inauguration on Wednesday. That's the way that it should be. It should be open to the public. I mean, I've been to a number of inaugurations for Republican and Democrat presidents with hundreds of thousands of Americans on the Mall observing as well. This is going to be very unique and not in a good way, in a very sad way, with the lack of a crowd and with all of the security measures that have been taken in place to make it work.
I want to turn to election integrity. Yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures, Maria spoke with South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham on the allegations of fraud in the 2020 election. Listen to this.
There was irregularities in mail-in voting. 66,000 people under 18 did not vote in Georgia. You did not have 8,000 felons as claimed voting from prison in Arizona. The election is over. The Electoral College certified the elections. I'm disappointed in the outcome. I wish he would have won. I appreciate what the president said Thursday. We reject violence. His movement is not about violence. It is about peace. It is about policy. It is now time to move on.
Congressman, you're introducing new legislation called the Save Democracy Act, which would require voters to present an ID, have 2 representatives from each campaign at polling places, and to continue vote counting without delays once it has begun. Congressman, this is really your reaction or pushback on H.R. 1, which was introduced by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, reintroduced, by the way, as the first legislative priority. And that is about really as the Wall Street Journal wrote last week, imposing California-style election rules nationwide in part.
Yeah, H.R. 1 would even go further than that. I mean, it would force every state to move toward mail-in ballots, and all of everything that you saw play out in November on election night. By the way, we have an all-time low trust in the American election system, and at least in my lifetime. So the American people have spoken out about this. They've lost trust, and I think a lot of it was Dagan, because on election night, the American people went to bed with one result. They woke up with a different result. They saw states who stopped counting ballots in the middle of the night. They heard suspicious stories of ballots showing up later weeks after Election Day with ballots showing up. So that's a recipe for sowing distrust in the American election system. And that's why I and 30 of my colleagues introduced the Save Democracy Act, which would prevent a number of these situations from happening. And it's very much a counter to H.R. 1, which is the Democrats' attempt to change the rules to benefit Democrats on Election Day. And enough of that nonsense. That's why Republicans are taking measures to pass legislation that restores trust in elections, make sure, by the way, that the states maintain overall control of how elections are conducted, which is the opposite of what H.R. 1 would do, but would secure a number of provisions that would protect election security, like requiring voter ID. These are non-controversial ways to address election security and returning trust to elections. That's why we introduced the bill that we did late last week.
I know Steve Forbes wants to jump in here. Steve?
Congressman, is there a way to prevent H.R. 1? Are they going to push it through? And the question then becomes, can they do it by simple majority in the Senate, or can they prevent it with a filibuster? Or do you think the filibuster is going to be repealed? What are the prospects of stopping H.R. 1 from becoming the law of the land?
Yeah, Steve, a lot of important questions. Let me say that H.R. 1 passed the House 2 years ago. It was their H.R. 1, which means it's their very top priority for House Democrats. It was 2 years ago. They passed it long before the pandemic even began, and they're going to pass it out of the House, I think, immediately here in the next week or two, where it will go to the Senate. And that's the big question. Will the Senate be able to block a measure like this? I hope that there will be a few Democrat senators who oppose measures like this. I hope that the filibuster can be preserved so that Republicans can weigh in on these important measures too. But make no doubt about it, if Democrats had their way, they would pass H.R. 1, they would nationalize the elections and move every state, including my state in Indiana, to mail-in ballots, which would open the door to tilting the elections in the Democrats' favor every single time.
And the Democrats, by the way, have also introduced a bill to provide statehood for the District of Columbia, guaranteeing Democrats two additional Senate seats. Congressman Jim Banks, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.